Welcome to the Money Answer Show with host Jordan Goodman. Whether you are starting out, deep into your retirement, or somewhere in between, the Money Answer Show has the know-how to help you. Now here's your host, Jordan Goodman.
Welcome to the Money Answer Show. This is Jordan Goodman, your host. My guest this hour is Nick Loper. He is the Chief Side Hustler at SideHustleNation.com. Welcome to the Money Answer Show, Nick.
Jordan, thanks for having me.
Just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into becoming the Chief Side Hustler at SideHustleNation.com.
Years and years of practice. My background in entrepreneurship started back in college. I was painting houses during the summers, and that kind of bit me with the entrepreneurial bug. It was my first taste of working for profits and not wages, and my first taste of dealing with the downsides of running your own business, right? Like a bunch of 19-year-olds with paint sprayers. What could go wrong? But fast forward, post-graduation, my first kind of online side hustle, my first kind of side hustle on the side from a corporate gig was a footwear comparison shopping site. So this is, at this point, over 10 years ago, back when people didn't just start their product searches on Amazon, they started them on Google. And so the comparison shopping site or comparison shopping game was a little bit bigger than it is today, right? Where can I find the best price on product XYZ? So I built that out specifically for footwear and collected commissions from Zappos and Amazon and all these other online footwear retailers. And that was the vehicle that let me quit my job.
Uh-huh. And so just tell us a little bit about the experience of side hustling, I guess you might say. How big is it today, and why are people doing side hustles as opposed to taking traditional corporate jobs?
A couple of reasons. So to address your first point, side hustling is perhaps more popular today than it ever has been. And in generations past, this is not a completely new thing. Maybe the terminology surrounding it is. In generations past, this might have been called moonlighting. People have been investing in real estate rental properties for generations, right? So it's not necessarily anything new, although a lot of the kind of online business opportunities and some of the gig economy type of opportunities certainly are. But the latest data is something like close to 50% of millennials have some sort of side hustle, 44 million Americans overall. And the factors kind of playing into that are twofold. The first side is the less positive side. I need this extra income in response to rising costs in healthcare, housing, education. I need this extra income to make ends meet. And that's kind of depressing. And that kind of paints a weird picture because we're in the strongest economy ever, 10-year run on the bull market, record low unemployment, yet all of these people are still having a hard time making ends meet. That's one side of it. The other side of it, which is, more positive, more optimistic, more proactive, are the people who are working corporate gigs but are saying, okay, how can I use my free time more productively? How can I use the hours that I have, the 24 hours in a day that we're all dealt, to build something that I care about, that pays me, that maybe is a little more time leveraged eventually than just trading hours for dollars, or maybe has this entrepreneurial upside that my day job doesn't have.
Let's go into the pros and cons of the gig economy. So let's start with the pros. I mean, you talked about it a little bit, but overall, what is the advantage of somebody, in effect, full-time doing side hustles instead of taking one job, which they spend most of their time at?
So I would consider gig economy stuff, the ones we're probably most familiar with are like driving for Lyft, renting a room on Airbnb, dog sitting on rover.com or something like that, or even like doing errands for people, TaskRabbit, assembling IKEA furniture on TaskRabbit or something like that. The advantage to those, incredibly fast to get started, right? You can, go through the kind of onboarding application process, very low overhead, very low startup costs to start these types of businesses. The drawback, especially when it comes to like some of the driving related ones, the Ubers and Lyfts of the world, or the DoorDash delivery people of the world, is there's no special skill required. Like almost anybody can do it. And so there's a natural downward pressure on how much you can earn versus, saying I'm a freelance writer, or I have the expertise in this particular area, and I can justify higher prices accordingly. Where else were we going with this?
And for people who, so that's one of the downsides. What are some of the other downsides of participating in the gig economy?
So there's probably a ceiling. So you're still trading hours for dollars. And so there's a kind of a ceiling to, realistically how much you can work. And at the same time, you're kind of playing in somebody else's sandbox. Like Uber has not been shy about, hey, we're test driving this fleet of self-driving cars. If you get negative feedback on their platform, they can boot you off. So there's the kind of the platform risk that goes along with that. Like you're not fully building your own brand.
Yeah, you don't control the situation completely, but other side hustles, you do control your situation, right? There's some that when you're trading time for dollars, you don't, but we're going to get into it in more detail, but there's lots of them where you do control the situation, right?
To a greater degree, for sure. So, I'm still reliant on Google for, discovery. If people searching for different side hustle ideas, they might come across my site. I'm still reliant on iTunes and some other distribution platforms to get my podcast out into the world, but I do have a little bit more control than if I was just, renting my house on Airbnb and 100% reliant on that marketplace for customers.
Yeah. Now there are what you call the big three business models. I'm going to go into this again in more detail, but what are the big three business models that people can choose from, or even do a little bit of each in side hustles?
Sure. So the big three, and this is not just side hustles, this is, almost every business in the world falls under one of these three categories. These are selling a service. So saying, hey, I can solve this problem for an individual customer, or I can solve this problem for a business owner. Selling a product. This could be a physical product. This could be a digital product. If you can package up your knowledge and expertise in a certain way. We've seen some interesting examples of that. People selling courses on how to bake sourdough bread, how to play the piano, how to sell microgreens at your local farmer's market, all sorts of fun stuff there. And it could even be what I'll call hybrid products, which could be a physical product that you never touch. So there's a lot of print-on-demand platforms that have popped up. Amazon has gotten into this game in a big way, where it's like I can upload a design, say a T-shirt design, or even a physical book or journal design with no physical inventory. Amazon will print that out and ship that to your customer when somebody orders it. Drop shipping might be another example of like a hybrid business model where the supplier, once you negotiate these kind of like wholesale supplier relationships, they'll ship that product to the end customer for you. So you don't have to have this big inventory risk or storage facility logistics network of your own, but you can tap into that. And then the third business model is the audience business model, the attention business model. This is the business model that obviously Facebook and Google have used to tremendous success. Say we're going to build a cool resource, people are going to come by and use that, and we're going to monetize that audience, usually with advertising.
Terrific. All right, we're going to give some examples of all of them. And again, there's many, many different ways of doing side hustles. How does somebody figure out what's best for them based on the amount of time they have, the skills they have, and what they enjoy doing? Of all the different choices, how do they pick what's best for them?
I'm trying to come up with like the best answer to that, because nobody ever, I've had 300 people on the podcast and nobody ever says, oh, well, I was Googling side hustle ideas and I just scrolled down to number 17 on the list and said, all right, let's do it. It almost always comes from some combination of a pre-existing skill set or interest or network or like into a certain community. So like if I were to start I'll give a real example. Like I started a proofreading and editing business for nonfiction books a few years ago. And that came about just as a result of like, hey, I'd written a couple of books myself at that point. So I was embedded in a couple of these Facebook communities for self-published authors. And on top of that, I was like, hey, I was a decent English student in school. I know how to read. I can figure this out. And as a result, started this editing business and niched down to say, I just want to read nonfiction, and then eventually niched down even more to say, I really only kind of want to read your business books because some of these other nonfiction topics like aren't really in my wheelhouse. If you've got vampire romance, like I'm not your guy, but if you're writing in this topic area, that's something that I feel like I can add value, help you craft a better narrative, help you craft a better book out of, and turned out to be a pretty fun little side business for a couple of years there.
So the main thing, or side hustle, should come out of your own experience, your own interest to some extent, and build on what you've already done, as opposed to start something that you've never done at all before. Is that right?
Yeah, the last thing that you need is a second job that you hate. So something doesn't necessarily need to be an undying passion of yours, but something that you have enough interest in to drive things forward. And then thinking that customers really only pay for skills and have their problems solved, so it definitely helps to start a business around your skill. And maybe the exception to that, because I've been in the position of like, well, I don't have any skills, is to say, well, first of all, you have the ability to learn new ones, like, get rid of that fixed mindset. And second thing is, like, maybe there's, to play one level higher. So we've had a couple interesting stories on the show where one example is a graphic design service called Design Pickle, which when I spoke to the founder, they were doing like $400,000 a month in recurring revenue. So it's unlimited graphic design requests for $350, $400 a month. And what he told me, Russ Perry, was, the truth is I sucked at design. And I was like, well, how did this work? So he kind of skipped the traditional freelance step of like, hey, I have this skill, I'm going to go offer it to clients. He said, no, I'm going to play connector between these businesses I know need graphic design and customer and designers overseas, in his case, who could get that work done.
Yeah, so he's putting, the value he was adding was putting the providers together with the customers, which is, and you don't have to have the skill yourself, but just putting them together is the value you're bringing in that case. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And we've seen people do this in house cleaning. It was another really interesting example. He said, like, I looked on Yelp and nobody was complaining about the cleaning. They were complaining, I couldn't get a quote. I couldn't, I didn't know when these people were going to come out. He's like, well, crap, I could do that. And set up a really interesting business by branding a fragmented, commoditized industry.
Very good. We're going to take a break. This is Jordan Goodman of the Money Answer Show. My guest this hour is Nick Loper. He is the chief side hustler at sidehustlenation.com, an expert on the whole new field of side hustling. We'll be back after this.
You've been listening to the Money Answer Show with Jordan Goodman. If you have a question for Jordan or his guest, please call us now at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now back to Jordan.
Welcome back to the Money Answer Show. This is Jordan Goodman, your host. My guest this hour is Nick Loper. He is the chief side hustler at sidehustlenation.com. Welcome back to the show, Nick.
Thanks again.
So just tell us a little bit, what can people find at sidehustlenation.com, and not only what's there, but tell us a little bit about the community that has kind of built around that.
Sure. So sidehustlenation.com is my home base, and it started in 2013 on the side from the comparison shoe shopping site I was telling you about, almost as this experiment, especially on the podcast side, to kind of build a personal brand, like realizing like, hey, I want to talk about, kind of a little bit of soul searching during that time to say like, what do you want to be known for when somebody Googles you? And it was this lower risk brand of entrepreneurship. This, look, you don't have to, you may have heard the definition of an entrepreneur as somebody who jumps off the cliff and figures out how to build their parachute on the way down. Like, that stresses me out to no end. It's like, no, start something small, start something on the side, make it low risk and build it up, as your time allows, as you're comfortable with, because that was my background. And then through the podcast, the light bulb moment for me was through the Side Hustle Show, was not in showcasing my own expertise, because I certainly don't have all the answers, but connecting with people who do, and sometimes would charge $1,000 an hour for consulting. But hey, because you have the podcast and this from doing the show as long as you have, is hey, they're right, willing to talk to you for free. If hey, we'll do this on air, and that has been I thought of myself as a writer first, but the podcast is really what is kind of the brand has become known for, is showcasing these different business ideas, these different entrepreneurial stories every week. Has been a truly life-changing experiment that, again, just started as a little side project, but within a year and a half, it was kind of my main focus.
And so is there a community where people connect to each other, not through you, to share ideas and share business concepts?
The biggest community aspect is through the Facebook group. So that's sidehustlenation.com/FB, and that'll redirect over there. Probably 12 or 13,000 people in there at this point. A very positive and supportive group of people, sharing ideas and offering feedback and suggestions and tips on a whole array of different business models.
Excellent. So when does it make sense to transition from something to a side hustle to make it into a full-time business?
For me, I wanted a track record of revenue, and I can't. It's been almost 10 years or over 10 years. So for me, I want to see 6 to 12 months of earnings history to at least cover my monthly fixed expenses. Like if I haven't replaced my day job salary yet, that's okay because hopefully I'm living below my means. But I would like to at least have it to the point where I can cover my expenses and have had some proof that I've been able to do that for some time. And then you can kind of see with an extra 40, 50 hours a week to dedicate to this, I think I can get it up to my income level and hopefully beyond.
How can a service business scale? I mean, how do you know if it can grow? I mean, because you can only have, as you say, 24 hours. There's only so much time you can do. But if you can scale it and have other people doing it and you get a piece of that, that's where the real leverage comes in. How do you know if a service business is appropriate to scale?
Yeah, so going this subcontractor route is definitely one way to go about it. We've seen people, actually, a friend of mine hosts urban hiking tours in San Francisco. And she's like, oh, yeah, I saw walking tours and bike tours and even like Segway tours. She's like, hey, but there were no hiking tours. And she loved to hike in the city. So she set up this business to do just that. And when we spoke, she was like in New York. I was like, wait, well, who's hosting this afternoon's hike? She's like, oh, I got people for that now. So that was really interesting. There are often ways to remove yourself from the delivery of the product or delivery of the service that you may not even think about. So that's one way to do it. Another, the other way that she scaled that business is by creating a product. Like for people who don't necessarily have or want to spend the $50 to go on one of her guided hikes, like she wrote the book on urban hiking San Francisco. So you can take kind of one of a virtual tour in that way through the book. So that allowed her to turn that service into a product. But there are quite a few ways. The subcontractor way is probably the most popular. One way that my wife and her partner have scaled their photography business was simply raising their rates. So they started off at some obscenely low rates because these brides were taking a risk on a couple of rookie photographers that had no portfolio on their wedding day. So it was a big risk for them. But over the years, they've probably 20x'd their rates from those early shows. So it's another way to kind of remove that as you kind of hit the capacity in your service business. Like, well, let's time to increase the price tag on it.
Great. What are some productivity tips for growing a business? If you only have limited hours, what are some ways you can be more productive in really scaling it up?
The most common answer that I get from asking my own community this question is to carve out the time, make it a habit daily, like put it on the calendar, and preferably, I was surprised how often this came up, preferably first thing in the morning. Like just set that alarm clock half an hour earlier, 60 minutes earlier, and try and get it in before the kids get up. That way you have your best, most clearest energy and focus for the day. And by the time you start your day job, or even before you start your commute, you've made like some positive momentum, some positive progress toward your goals. And I've found this same thing to be super powerful. One thing that I try to make a habit of doing is to name my top 3 priorities for tomorrow, the night before. So when I get up and get to work, I know exactly what I need to work on and in what order. And I don't have this 45-minute ramp-up period of checking email and checking Facebook. It's like, nope, this is what yesterday Nick said was important, so let's go tackle that first, and then we can dive into more reactive mode.
Very good. Now, there are 4 different types of passive income that the side hustles fit into. What are those 4 types?
Oh, geez, you're quizzing me on this stuff. I might have to go look up and reference this. The one that people are probably most familiar with is the make money with money option, which would be dividend investing or even just traditional investing. Like, I'm going to buy a cash flowing asset and have it pay me returns on that. Like, that's what most people are familiar with, and it's fantastic. It works if you have money to invest. The other
you have to have capital to get started with.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. Very capital intensive. The other areas focus more on like, okay, what can you do if you don't necessarily have that upfront investment capital? And so those have been the areas that I've focused on a lot, especially during the growth phase. So passive income method number 2 is to build those own assets that can spin off cash flow. That could be especially under the audience business model we talked about earlier, where it's like, okay, I'm going to build a resource that's worth paying attention to in the online world. That's oftentimes a blog or a website, a podcast, or a YouTube channel, where it's like, okay, now I have this body of work that is getting crawled and indexed in these different search engines. People come to that site, they click on affiliate links, there's advertising on the site, or there's ads on my YouTube channel. So it's become a passive income asset. But it didn't take a ton of time, didn't take a ton of money, rather, to start, but did take usually a lot of time and effort to kind of get off the ground and get to that point. The third area of passive income that is perhaps overlooked is, the assets that you may already own or control. So this is the, Airbnb model, where it's like, okay, I already have this spare bedroom that, grandma and grandpa come to visit, 2 weekends a year, but the rest of the time it sits idle. Like, could you put that to use? I think there are some other interesting ones that are kind of popping up, especially in the, even the vehicle sharing space. Some friends of ours in San Diego, they were super excited about this because they were like, hey, we both work from home. We don't need 2 cars at once. They're just sitting in the driveway. So they started renting them out on Turo.com, Turo, and ended up like totally neutralizing their lease payments on these cars, and then started earning enough to like pay for a Tesla. And they were like, this is our dream car. They were so excited about it. So that's kind of a way to, make money with the assets that you maybe already have. And I wouldn't necessarily call those particularly passive, but certainly time leveraged, because you're not, providing a specific service in exchange for however many hours you worked. And then the fourth one is something that people don't pay a ton of attention to, and that's just like the reverse passive income. If I can cut my monthly expenses, if I can save something that's drawing $50 a month, $100 a month from my account every time, that's perhaps even better than earning $50 or $100 a month, because of, if you earned $100 a month, you have to pay income taxes on it. But if you save it, it's just straight to your bottom line.
Terrific. Well, we're going to go into detail on all 4 different types when we come back from the break. Again, this is the Money Answer Show with Jordan Goodman. My guest this hour is Nick Loper. He is the Chief Side Hustler at SideHustleNation.com. You can go there and see his blog and his podcast, and there's a whole community to join, learning everything about side hustling. So we'll be back with more details on all this after this.
You've been listening to the Money Answer Show with Jordan Goodman. If you have a question for Jordan or his guest, please call us now at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now back to Jordan.
Welcome back to the Money Answer Show. This is Jordan Goodman, your host. My guest this hour is Nick Loper. He is the Chief Side Hustler at SideHustleNation.com, an expert on the whole gig economy and side hustling. Welcome back to the show, Nick.
Thanks again.
So on your SideHustleNation.com website, you have a whole list of different kind of potential side hustles, what you call 23 passive income streams. And we're just going to briefly go through a few just to give people a sense of what some of the possibilities and how those might work. Well, one of the first ones is affiliate commissions, kind of affiliate marketing. And tell us a little bit about how that works.
You bet. So this is like my original side hustle going back from 2004, 2005, 2006 in the shoe business, like trying to sell footwear online. Essentially, affiliate marketing is helping another company sell their product and service online. And that means in exchange for that lead or that customer, they're going to pay you a percentage of that sale. For physical goods that may range from 1 or 2%, especially for computer hardware and stuff like that, very low margin. In the footwear space, that was around 10 to 20% when I started. It kind of crept down over time. But in the digital product space, like if you're helping a friend of yours sell their online course that might be a fit for your audience, that could be 30, 40, 50% commission on that sale because the incremental costs to deliver it are so low.
And there are platforms to go to. You don't have to find them yourself. There are platforms to go to that already have plenty of companies ready to pay you affiliate commissions, right?
Correct. So Commission Junction is one of the main ones I've been using for years. ShareASale.com, Rakuten Linkshare was called Linkshare back in the day, and then Impact Radius is another one where you can kind of find they're aggregators for these different offers. So you can kind of see what would be a fit for your people, what would be a fit for your audience, and see if you can plug that in.
The next one is podcast advertising. So a lot of people have podcasts today. How do you attract advertising? And just roughly, what do you charge for it? How could you know how to price these things?
Oh my gosh, it is the wild, wild west when it comes to pricing podcast advertising. So I don't know if there's any hard and fast rules for this, but this is something that didn't happen overnight, but around 3 years deep into the show, sponsors started reaching out to me, or potential sponsors started reaching out to me. Hey, would you like, we'd like to get in front of your audience. Like, what would you charge for an advertisement spot on your show? And it's just kind of up to you to begin that negotiation. Some of the baseline numbers might be $25 per every 1,000 listeners. So if you have 10,000 people listening to your podcast, what's that? $250 for a mid-roll spot. It might be a baseline starting point, but you can create a package like, okay, we're going to do a 3-month run. We're going to, include you on our show notes page and our YouTube channel and in our email newsletter and in our social media, and you kind of make it an attractive deal for the sponsor. And if you have a super niche audience where there's nowhere else they can get in front of those people, like they might be willing to pay exponentially more than that. And I've seen some friends do that in some very targeted spaces. Like a friend of mine runs a podcast for HVAC technicians, and specifically like teaching them the skills of like how to become an HVAC technician, and has some incredible sponsors with the air conditioning part manufacturers, because they're like, these are the exact people that we need to reach. Where else are you going to find these people, right? Right. It's just like the most random niche thing, but he's done really, really well with it.
Terrific. The next one is Kindle book sales. So this is if you write a book, you can sell it online. How does that work?
Yeah, so I really like these types of business models, and affiliate marketing is similar, where you can kind of create this asset once, hopefully this, in the case of affiliate marketing, like a really definitive article that it tends to pick up traffic and rankings in Google. On Kindle, Amazon has opened up the floodgates to self-publish authors, for better or worse. On the positive side, it's super easy for anybody to publish a book. And for me, that was really exciting to put my book up for sale on like the world's largest store, and then a few months later get my first royalty check. And it was less than $50, so I don't want to make it sound like this was some crazy get rich quick thing. But it was super rewarding. Like, I'm a professional author. Somebody bought my thing. And since then, I've added a bunch more books to the portfolio. And it's this really cool thing. Like, the surprising thing for me was, so I had a website, I actually still do. It was on the topic of, hiring and working with virtual assistants, kind of, administrative support or business support that's not directly in your office. And I thought people would come to the website, see that, oh, this guy wrote the book on the topic, let's go check it out. Almost the opposite ended up happening. People would instead search on Amazon for this topic and then buy the book and then discover the website. So it kind of opened my eyes not only to the author royalty piece of it, but to Amazon as a discovery engine. Like, what is your topic that people might be Googling for? Sure, your website hopefully will show up, but just as often, and perhaps even more valuable, is Amazon as being a search engine of buyers. Like, what are they searching for on Amazon? Are they finding you there?
And they're looking for books, they're looking for Kindles on Amazon and find you that way.
Yes. I don't know. Have you gone down that path at all?
So,
I know you got the affiliate site or your website presence and the podcast. Like, have you done the Kindle thing?
Yeah, I've done 14 books myself, and they're electronic as well. But the next step is actually to print them out. So Amazon has this print-on-demand service, I guess. So the same thing that's electronic can also be printed, and they ship it. Is that the idea of that?
Yes, and so this is really rewarding, especially when you can, like, get a copy in hand and show it off. You're like, hey, now it becomes real, and that's been really cool. So it's called KDP Print, all under Amazon's Kindle publishing platform. No physical inventory. You don't have to have a garage full of books, and incredibly, I don't understand how they make any margin on this, but their cost to print this book would be like $2.73 or something, and it's like free Prime shipping for the customer. You're like, okay, it's awesome.
Yes, and you can charge whatever you want for it, basically. Yes.
Yeah, you set your own price, and kind of the latest side hustle du jour, or the latest kind of side hustle gold rush that's come across my desk, is the concept of publishing low content books. And what I mean by that is, historically, self-publishing has been like, all right, it's me and my computer, and I'm going to pump out 35,000 words on a topic that I know a lot about, and that's going to be my book. The low content publishing is like, okay, I can create a journal on something that I'm interested in. So some of the examples that people gave on the podcast were like, a guitar tab journal, or like a dog training journal, or like a weightlifting journal. And, it could be mostly blank inside. Maybe it's a page a day kind of prompt thing that people could fill in. And that was really interesting to me, because that could shortcut, it might take months to, come up with all the content and editing for that book. But here's a way to, get in the self-publishing game without that, huge 30, 40,000 word brain dump.
Just the categories. You don't need content that goes in. The buyer of the book provides the content. It's kind of like Facebook, that the customer provides the content in a case like that. And then the next one is audiobooks. So do people buy a lot of audiobooks today?
For me, this was probably more important, and maybe for you as well, since people are familiar with my voice from the podcast, I wanted to record my own audiobooks in a couple cases. And it was, especially the first time, it was way harder than I thought it was going to be to read what I wrote word for word. And it was like, sometimes you do 10 takes for one sentence. You're like, apparently that was a crappy sentence because I can't even read it. But it was one of my books called Buy Buttons. It earned about a couple grand, worth of audiobook sales and bounties. So that's the other piece of the audiobook game, which is like, if you can refer people to Audible, if it's their first audiobook, they pay you pretty handsomely for that. I think it's around $50 for referring a new customer to them, more than you would earn just in a straight audiobook royalty.
Yeah. And then the next one you have is to do online courses. There's something called Udemy. Is that the way it's pronounced?
Udemy.com, UDEMY.
Explain how that works. Yeah.
It's a peer-to-peer education platform with millions and millions of students at this point. I'm not sure how many instructors they have, but this is kind of cool because you can package up your knowledge and expertise, and maybe it's the same knowledge and expertise that you put into your book, and put that into a video course. And if you don't want to be on camera, you could do voiceover, PowerPoint type of thing. But once it's up there, it could sell for years. So there was a course that I produced in 2014 that still makes sales every month. And so that's kind of been a rewarding passive income stream. And like all of these, there are people who are going, what's the phrase? I'm a mile wide and an inch deep. Other people are going an inch wide and a mile deep, and they've created dozens and dozens of these Udemy courses, and they're doing partnerships with other instructors, and they've got hundreds of thousands of students. But again, another way to build up a little bit of passive income. The drawback to Udemy, and especially if your listeners are familiar with this, is they discount the crap out of everything. So, this course is normally $195. Well, today only it's $12.99. Except today only is 20 days out of the month. They're always running these pretty heavy promo. So they've trained their customers to say this is what
you have
a
no
course is worth.
marginal cost. I mean, once you've created the thing, it's all just gravy, basically.
Right. So if you want to command higher prices for your courses, you're going to have to host it on your own, and you got to bring your own audience to the game. So that's the benefit of Udemy, is their built-in database of students.
And then Skillshare is another one. What's the difference between Udemy and Skillshare?
So Udemy is a la carte. You go and pick and choose the courses that you want. Skillshare operates like Netflix. It's a monthly membership where you have unlimited streaming access to their entire catalog, and then as the instructor, as you upload your course, you get paid based on the interest and engagement of of our membership base, how many people took your course?
I see. So, but it's the same. You could have the same course on both.
Yes.
You just get paid differently. That's all. Yeah. Okay. Then another one you have is to sell digital products on Fiverr. Fiverr people think of as a way of getting freelance, but how does that work to sell digital products there?
So Fiverr, yes, it's one of the big freelance marketplaces, and kind of a cool a la carte ordering service where it's like, hey, I can do XYZ for $5, or in most cases more than that now. They've kind of graduated from the $5 thing. But I wanted to test this out because it's like, it stemmed from a podcast interview that I did on the Side Hustle show with a guy who supposedly earned enough money on Fiverr in his first year to buy a house, and he was somewhere in Chicago, so not like a crazy, inexpensive housing market. It's like, how does that work? What could you possibly do for $5 that would be worth your while? And he explained, no, Nick, it's all about the upsell. So the $5 thing has got to be, something you can deliver in 2 seconds, and you just it's a PDF file, it's an audio file you've already created, and then if somebody wants your time, they can buy that in the upsells and the extras. It's oh, okay, interesting. So I ended up putting a couple of my books up for sale there. I ended up creating a couple other digital assets. One of them I have is this big list of blog post ideas. Another one is here's how to write your Kindle book description. It's here's the formula that's worked for me. And so it's I don't necessarily want to do this work for you, but if you want to do it yourself, here, let me guide you down that path.
Yeah, so you kind of hook them in with the $5 thing, but then offer more personalized service, and that's when you can charge significant money, is what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah, and they'll let you do custom gigs, I think up to $10,000. So they've definitely graduated from this, race to the bottom $5 marketplace.
Very good. All right, we're going to take another break. This is Jordan Goodman of the Money Answer Show. My guest this hour is Nick Loper. He is the chief side hustler at sidehustlenation.com. You see, he's got lots of different ideas about what you can do with your time to make money, as many, many people are doing these days. We'll be back after this.
You've been listening to The Money Answer Show with Jordan Goodman. If you have a question for Jordan or his guest, please call us now at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now back to Jordan.
Welcome back to The Money Answer Show. This is Jordan Goodman, your host. My guest this hour is Nick Loper. He is the chief side hustler at sidehustlenation.com. Lots of ideas on how to make money from side hustles. Welcome back to the show, Nick.
We are back.
So we're talking about different side hustles. Another one you talk about is selling featured listings in directories. How does that work?
One of this comes from a guest of mine, actually, who has a food truck website specifically aimed at helping aspiring restaurateurs start their food trucks. And what he found was there were a bunch of different sellers companies that would kind of outfit these big, vans and trucks to make them kitchen compatible. And so he's he built this whole database of those types of companies. And then he had people reaching out to him hey, can we pay you? I think he had it sorted alphabetically or something, or by state. He's can we pay you to be at the top of the listing? He's of course you can. Let's make this happen. And so I ended up doing the same thing on a site of mine, actually that virtual assistant site that I was talking about, where it's had people reaching out to me for years. And I was kind of hesitant to do it. But then I, looked at Google and looked at Yelp and looked at TripAdvisor, and every kind of review database directory does this, where it's okay, here's the featured listings, and here's kind of the organic search results. So ended up doing that, and that has been a nice little incremental income stream.
Now, you talk about various forms of advertising. There's traditional display ads on websites, but there's also non-display ads and YouTube ads. How do those work?
So let's tackle the non-display ads first, because this is kind of an interesting one. So if we go back to the food truck guy, so maybe he takes a different approach. Says, like, I don't want to have banner ads on my site, but these customers or these advertisers still want to get in front of my audience. Like, what would be another way to do that? Well, another way to do that is to place their retargeting pixels on the back end of your website. So they'll be able to create Facebook audiences, Google audiences to retarget people who visited that website. They know they're interested in starting a food truck, but now they have the access and permissions, and just make sure you update your privacy policy, terms and conditions, all that stuff to say, like, hey, we may be doing this. But an interesting way, and you can host several of these at once, so you're not cluttering up your site with ads, but still helping advertisers, reach that audience.
And then YouTube ads is the other one. That's typically you have to do an ad as a video, or it's provided to, but it happens before or after your YouTube video plays. Is that the idea?
Yes, so this is for YouTube creators, and I think it's only available to YouTube creators with over 1,000 subscribers. But if you're creating content somewhat consistently, or you have a hit video or two, and honestly, some of my best performing videos are just like how I solved this problem. It's like how to make Dropbox stop doing something weird, or how to solve this thing in Gmail. Like, not over the top, highly produced, YouTube video with a lot of graphics and everything like that. But the interesting thing was, I was talking to a friend of mine who actually is kind of like a YouTube celebrity. He's got, I don't know how many million subscribers now. He was like, he didn't have ads on his channel for a long time because he's like, I don't want ads. He's like, YouTube viewers expect ads. They don't understand that the channel creator has the option to toggle those on or off. They just think it's YouTube showing an ad before their videos. He's like, well, you might as well turn them on and make some money. And there may be some evidence, algorithmically, that Google now wants to show your videos to more people because they know they're making more money off it as well. So it's been an interesting, not a huge, again, this is probably $100, $120 a month for me at this point, with a channel of 6,000 subscribers. Not a huge YouTube channel, but something that's been built up over time. But something to add. It all adds up.
It does. How many sources of passive income do you have, you think, if you add them all up?
Well, there's 23 listed on this site, and there's been actually a couple more that I've added since then. As I was doing the research, well, let me try this. Usually they're the alternative investment type of plays, where it's let me throw some money over here, see what happens.
Okay. All right. Now then, there's ways to invest in real estate. One's called Fundrise. How does that work?
So Fundrise is an e-REIT. So that's a real estate investment trust, and they've got actually several different bundles of properties or REITs that they've kind of packaged together. It is not going to be as diversified as a Vanguard REIT, like VNQ or something like that. But in exchange, again, a curated list of properties, take it or leave it, whether you believe in their vetting process for what they add to their portfolio. But because of that, typically a higher yield than VNQ as well. So that's been something I've been playing around. Don't take this as investment advice or solicitation for investment, but I've been an investor there since late 2015 and been happy with that.
And then Peer Street is another way to invest in real estate. How does that work?
Yeah, my journey in Peer Street actually started on a different peer-to-peer site, and that was prosper.com. Way back, probably 2011, I started with them, which was peer-to-peer loans, usually for debt consolidation, or, I'm trying to save up and pay for my wedding or something like that, personal loans, not backed by anything, just no personal guarantee, no assets, backing up. Peer Street says we're going to do something similar, but on real estate rehab projects. And so it's a larger minimum, $1,000 minimum per loan, which I was nervous about at the beginning. Man, if one of these goes south, that's a pretty good chunk to lose out on. And I actually had a deal go into foreclosure that they were able to recoup. And they do that because they have a pretty good equity cushion on all these deals, a pretty good loan to value on all these different deals. So again, we haven't had any major real estate downturns since I've been on either of these platforms, but it's one way as a renter, not a homeowner, that I've been adding real estate to the overall portfolio.
Another thing you recommend is what's called Kick Further. People may be familiar with Kickstarter, but how does Kick Further work?
Kick Further is an interesting startup out of Denver or Boulder that helps growing e-commerce companies fund their next round of inventory. Because one of the most popular side hustles and side hustles turned into full-time businesses is e-commerce, and specifically selling on Amazon. And what I found, at least my friends who have done this have found, is like once you have a product that hits, you can't keep it in stock. And so you plowing all of your profits back into more inventory, probably for that first year, before you're taking any cash off the table for yourself. Very capital intensive business. So Kick Further kind of came in to address that and say, okay, we can provide that capital at an attractive rate of return for your investors. You have these companies have some proven demand for their products, so you're not coming completely out of thin air, and they're going to turn that over. They know it's going to turn over in 5 to 7 months or something. So a little bit of a way to kind of turn over that investment capital a little bit quicker.
Terrific. Another one in the real estate space you talk about is Realty Mogul. How does that work?
Realty Mogul, I haven't invested with them personally yet, but my understanding is it's similar to. I'm not going to speak to it because I'm probably going to mess it up. So I'm going to take a punt on that one.
That's okay. So let's kind of sum up here. When is it appropriate for somebody to spend time and effort looking into all these different side hustles if they're having trouble making enough money with their traditional job?
Well, the thing to think about there is like no one is going to care more about your financial future than you are. So it's easy to say, okay, I'll look at this next month, I'm going to look at this next year, or I'm going to look at this when things settle down at work. The timing is never going to be right, and you really have to take charge and kind of think of your household as a business in itself. Like, what's your personal profitability look like? And that's income minus expenses. And you have to be really honest with yourself. Like, okay, sure, I can cut expenses, but there's only so much. I mean, I still got to eat and I still need a place to live. So it's like, you got to look at the income side. What can I do to increase income? And even if it's just, dedicating half an hour a day to this stuff, I think it's a very worthwhile investment. So we talked about, 23 different passive income streams. When I started, I had 0 passive income streams, right? But I built those up over the course of the last decade and a half.
Yeah. And so what do you think is the future of side hustling? Is this going to just get bigger and bigger?
That's I wonder if it just becomes so mainstream where it's just like not even a thing anymore. We are seeing a shift towards kind of a freelance economy, and that's to the benefit of freelancers to a certain extent. Like, okay, I've got some flexibility. I can name my own price. There's some downsides to that as well, primarily in the form of benefits and insurance and like kind of the overhead cost that comes with full-time employees. But for employers, it's a little bit more flexible too. Like I can, like in my business, I have a ton of very specialized freelancers that tackle, one small segment of the business. Like I don't need a full-time support staff, but I would like to hire somebody to edit my podcasts. And so that's a service that I'm able to buy on the freelance side. So definitely an increase in the freelance economy, the work from home economy, and excited to see where it goes in terms of like flexible earning power and people doing things that they care about, because that's ultimately what is going to sustain it because it's hard. And so it's like you got to have something that you care about to move forward with.
Terrific. Well, thanks so much. My guest this hour has been Nick Loper. He is the Chief Side Hustler at SideHustleNation.com. There's a lot of free content on his website, blogs and podcasts, all kinds of ideas, a whole community to connect with as well. So thanks so much for being a great guest on the Money Answer Show, Nick.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again. We'll be back next week with another edition of the Money Answer Show. Goodbye for now.
Thank you for joining Jordan Goodman and the Money Answer Show. If you have a question for Jordan, please visit his website at www.moneyanswers.com. And be sure to tune in every Monday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time right here on Voice America Business. See you next week.